I'm now going to transition to introducing one of my mentors, a woman that I admire greatly, and many people in this room admire her as well. Dr. Tamara Fountain, who is president-elect of ASOFers and has had just about every single role in the academy that you can imagine. Tamara?
All right. I'm happy to be here. And how many people, is this your first time to New Orleans? Is it your first Academy meeting? Terrific. I understand that I missed the first snowfall in Chicago as I'm eating my way through the French Quarter, so I'm really happy to be here. So Prima asked me if I would talk to you as if I was talking to my children and telling them what I think about going into ophthalmology. Now, if they were this age, I'd tell them, pay attention in your spelling bee, because you can't go into it unless you can spell it. So you're gonna have to help me. I'm gonna have to pretend you all are my children for the next few minutes so I can talk to you as if you were my children. Put down that phone and look at me, please. I'm sorry. I'm just so used to saying that to my own children. All right. So I ran into a colleague of mine. He's about my age, walking on the second floor. We're on the second floor, on the third floor. And I said, how you doing? He said, well, I'm alive. You know, I say that a lot too. And he says, no, I'm really alive. I was doing 5 cases in the OR in April. And I felt fine for the first case. In the second case, I was getting a little uncomfortable in my abdomen. And I thought maybe it was gas. I just needed a fart. But that didn't seem to help. By the 4th case, he was doubled over. And he couldn't do the 5th case because he'd perfed his colon, apparently. And he said the name, but I didn't pay attention in this portion of medical school, some type of perforation that has a 40% mortality. Fortunately, he was in the 60% that survived. And he was talking about how he was in a meeting with his partners, and perennially they argue about overhead and money. And he said to me, he's like, I was sitting in the back and I said, I don't care. I look at things a whole lot differently than I used to now that I almost died. And I think sometimes when we encounter problems, just having a little bit of a different look at it can help us as well. I remember when I was a medical student studying for step 1 of the boards, we were getting really worked up about it, me and my medical school class. I mean, we had taken the PSATs, we had taken the SATs, maybe even the ACTs, depending on where you live. This was the first test where we actually could fail it, you know, not just get a bad score, but we could actually fail it. It was like a 5% failure rate, and I was worried about that. And I remember talking to my grandmother. We talked maybe once a week by phone. She's a little tiny wisp of a thing. She's 92 now. I have to do the math to figure out how old she was back then. And I still have her. I'm really lucky I still have her. But I was talking to her. She's from a little rural Appalachian Virginia town. She lives about 3 miles from where she was born. She doesn't have a lot of education, but she's super smart. And so she's asking how I was doing, and I was complaining about my lot and how I was studying for this big old test that all doctors have to take, and I might fail it. And she goes, well, God, Tam, what'll happen? What'll happen if you fail it? And I was like, oh, God, Granny, I'm going to have to take it again. And there was this pause. And she said, they'll let you take it again? You mean you can still be a doctor? You just have to take it again? She said, well, what do you worry about? So there are many problems in life: divorce, mental illness, sick child, dying parent. I'm not saying this problem was anywhere near those, but that comment of hers I've carried with me through my life, because almost always when you're dealing with some difficulty, whatever challenge is ahead of you, if you really think about it in a slightly different way, you'll recognize it's maybe not as insurmountable as it seems. So, talking about those big adult problems, so if I was talking to you as my children, I would say, you're going to encounter some big adult problems when you get older. And the best way to get ready for those is to practice right now. So my job as a parent is to make sure I don't protect you from every little aggravation, every sadness, and every rejection. That's my job. It's like when they tell kids, go out there and eat some dirt so you don't have asthma later on. You need to kind of build yourself up. And by the way, if that dirt is near a farm with a little, note of E. coli, even better. In fact, if you watch a snowboard class like I did this past winter, I was skiing past, and they were teaching these little tiny kids how to snowboard. And the first thing they taught them is how to get up after they fall, because it's hard on a board to get up. You fall a lot. And that's kind of like life. You know what? You got to learn how to pick yourself back up. One of the panelists earlier today mentioned something that I thought I should add this. So most of you have not encountered too much in the way of rejection yet. You wouldn't be here if you had. And maybe you haven't encountered it at all yet, but you will. All of us do. And it's hard. It's hard not to get something that you want. But how many people have ever sat on a residency selection committee? Okay, so you know what it's like. You know how accomplished these candidates are coming through. And sometimes the capricious factors which go into how you make your final selections. And if you've got 5 spots, you know that 6th person could have done great at your institution. But if you're that 6th person getting that letter, you might think, I am completely not worthy. I was boxing outside of my class. I just can't do it. So just remember, there could be so many reasons why you weren't the right fit at that right time for whatever you're searching for. And don't internalize it. And you know what? Most of success in life is not necessarily about ability, but your ability to bounce back from something that knocks you down. So, if my kids are at this point thinking, okay, do I want to be a doctor? I would say there are a lot of challenges. Doctors are getting paid differently. Patients are getting their health care delivered differently. We've got to figure this out, and we've got some smart minds on it, but it's going to be a tough nut to crack. There's also so much information. I heard David Parks say that the rate of doubling of the information that we have to incorporate used to be about every 10 years. He said this, I'm not sure what his source was, but he claimed that medical knowledge doubles now in the time that it takes you to complete your residency. These are challenges, but they're also opportunities, and these are the things that are changing. But there are lots of things about medicine that won't change. You remember the Boston bombings? I went to medical school in Boston, and I remember being glued to the TV as they interviewed some of the physicians that were part of that response, as well as some Good Samaritan bystanders. And a couple weeks after the bombings, they were interviewing somebody who had been amputated next to the person, non-medical, who had helped by applying a tourniquet on that patient and maybe saved their life. Even though the limb couldn't be saved, their life was saved. And the amputee was rather circumspect on camera, speaking about this experience. When they went to interview the first responder broke down with emotion at what it felt like to help somebody and make a difference in somebody's life. And that stuck with me because that's the part of healthcare that won't ever change. Everybody in this room, our hearts are beating, our lungs are taking in air. There's going to come a time that that's going to become more difficult, and eventually neither of those things are going to be working anymore. And on that very universal journey, unless you get hit by a shuttle bus crossing the street to Melades later on, you're going to be a consumer in the healthcare sector. And we're going to need physicians. You know, technology might make us better clinicians, but there's no app for the compassion that our patients need and crave. When you think about it, who else can maybe touch a person in a place that only a lover has touched? Or who can ask a question that would be unspeakable in any other setting? Who can literally hold somebody's heart in their hand? Doctors get to do that. Investment bankers don't get to do that. Actresses, professional athletes, news anchors, all great professions. They don't get to do that, but we do. So why the eye? Well, I'd start by saying that you can treat children to grown-ups, to centenarians. It's a wide spectrum. It's primary care in some levels, as well as surgery. It's great. For something a little bit more than an inch long, you have 10 subspecialties, so it's got something for everyone. That's from the provider side of things. Sight, it's something sacred about sight. Anybody who was at the ASOPers meeting heard this guy. His name is Craig McFarlane. And he had a freak accident at age 2 to one eye and lost the vision in the other eye from sympathetic ophthalmia. And he's known as the most famous completely blind athlete. He's got hundreds of gold medals in wrestling, track and field, amazingly, skiing and water jumping. Most of his medals came against sighted individuals. And he gave a very inspirational talk at the ASOPers meeting on Thursday. And he said, for all the success I had, he's now a paid inspirational speaker. He speaks all over the world. He said, I would give up all of that to be able to see my kids' faces, to be able to see a rainbow. So to be guardians of that, it doesn't get any better. It says it right there in our tagline, protecting sight and empowering lives. It just doesn't get any better. I would also add to my kids, if they went into ophthalmology, they would have the power of a 32,000-member organization and its Young Ophthalmology Committee and program dedicated to nothing but making sure they launch their careers. And I want to give thanks and credit, first of all, to the Academy, who recognized a long time ago that investing in your generation was worth it. And we're seeing that return on investment right now. I also want to thank the many individuals, some very young, some older, not much younger than I, who've played a pivotal role in making this program work. This program here, it simply would not have happened without years of dedication from people who have passed through this group and who are still here. I must acknowledge Gail and Nisha for the role that you all play, as well as our current committee and team members. So ophthalmology is great. So I don't have any budding ophthalmologists. They didn't listen to me. At least they didn't listen to me about the whole medicine ophthalmology part. But they are independent, and they are bouncing back from what challenges that life is throwing at them, as will each one of you. It's taken a lot of work to get here for all of you. And so congratulations on that. And I wish you luck in this really exciting journey coming ahead. Thank you.